to this session, which we are holding on election year 2024, implications for the international community. As you know, this year many countries are going to hold their general elections. Some very important countries, like the United States, already in election mode. India, whose election path one can say was started yesterday by the inauguration of the Ram Mandir by Narendra Modi. Indonesia, Russia, the United Kingdom, our own country, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Taiwan, which have already held elections, and South Africa, just to name a few. The European Union will also go to the polls, so it is a very busy calendar for elections on the global stage. Now, who wins and who doesn't is going to set the path or the trail for what is going to happen to the world in the next few years. And so this year has been described as the Super Bowl of elections. Now, to discuss these elections and their fallout for the international community, we have two very distinguished speakers, Dr. Maria Sultan and Ambassador Mustafa Kazi. I will first introduce Dr. Maria Sultan. She is Chairperson and President of the South Asian Strategic Stability Institute, University in Islamabad. She is advisor to the Ministry of Defense on strategic and military affairs. She started her career as a journalist working for the Muslim in Islamabad, and she was formerly the Deputy Director of South Asian Strategic Stability Unit at the Bradford Disarmament Research Center. Also a research fellow at the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad, which many of you would know is the think tank of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She specializes in South Asian nuclear arms control issues, disarmament and weapon systems development, and she has published widely in academic journals and the South Asian media. She is a very popular anchor person in both television and radio programs. She is visiting faculty in Pakistan's leading universities, National Defense University, Foreign Service Academy, Pakistan Naval War College, and of course Qaid-e-Azam University. She is also the author of 2 books, about which she will say a few words herself. So over to you, Dr. Maria Sultan.
Ma'am, thank you so much. Let me just begin that this is my maiden visit to Karachi to be sitting in a very distinguished academic gathering, and I would be failing in my duty if I do not extend my vote of appreciation to Dr. Mustafa for giving me this opportunity, and for the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs for bringing us together on a subject which is going to affect not only global security but also global economic patterns, and last but not least, in terms of how we view international relations. The topic which has been given to me is looking at global elections and its impact on international affairs. I'm by far not a social scientist which is focused on internal issues. Nonetheless, I will endeavor to share with you a few statistics on it and then few emerging trends which are likely to happen as we look at this global election year worldwide. At this moment, it is considered that this is going to be a super election year. So this means that 75 countries are going into election this year, worldwide. That means 4.2 billion people will decide what is going to be the future of world affairs, future of their political affairs, but most importantly, in terms of how internal security, external security, and most importantly, the trends in international affairs is going to be affected. I will be talking a bit in terms of the key 8 elections to watch in 2024, plus 2 others, which is, of course, Pakistan and India. And then we will just highlight a few of the trends which are there, and most importantly, what would be the possibility in terms of how we view it. So just to begin with, starting from January onwards, we are talking about the entire world deciding for the future. This is just one picture. As you can see, these are the countries which are going into election, and you can see there are 75 countries which are going into election this year. So this is considered as a super election year from that point of view. And when you look at it, then there's also the bigger question that there are going to be elections not just in countries which are run by 2 parties or countries which are just run or committed to some regional security situations. There are also going to be countries which are going to affect global politics. So what are we talking about? Unions such as the European Union, the 22 plus countries which will be going for these parliamentary elections. We're just going to briefly go through each one of them and see how and what the trends are. Secondly, some of the conflict high zones. Some of you are quite familiar with it, such as Ukraine, such as Gaza, and most importantly, how these military situations are going to be impacting them. And last but not least, the big powers. And in this case, I'm talking about the big powers in terms of 2 basic countries. One is United States, and second is, of course, Russia. And the reason why we picked up on these 2 countries is essentially because of the fact that these 2 countries will also affect the socio-economic order and will also affect the socio-military order which is going to emerge. It depends upon who is going to come into power, what are their prospects, and whether or not they're actually going to make it. The 7 most populous countries, that is India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Russia, and Mexico, are also going into elections. So this basically means pretty much 50% of the world population is going to decide. Now, this means that as we look into 2024 elections, there are 5 trends to watch out. Number 1, this is the first time that all of those people who are under 40 will be casting their votes in a decisive manner in a very interesting point in history. That's one. Secondly, there is a global economic recession. So the bigger question at this moment is not just about who comes to power, it's also about what are going to be global preferences. Third, this is also a year considered to be a year in which global conflicts are no longer considered welcome. We have had endless wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and now the latest war in Ukraine, and then followed by the situation in Gaza. So in that case, you're looking at that high points as well. What is the level of frustration which people are looking at? And one of the consequent results of these international conflicts has been international migration trends. I think no other country understands international migration linked to international conflict than Pakistan with the Afghan refugees, which we have. But most importantly, there's also migrant trends, not only in United States, but also a reverse trend in Russia in terms of how reverse migration is happening as a result of the war in Ukraine. So this is pretty much changing the demographic makeup also in different parts of the world. Of course, there's also the bigger question of Mexico, and there's also the question in terms of how the US primaries have come about. And for the first time, we have seen that there is internal establishment review. Like earlier, immigrant populations did not count in national elections. This is the first time where immigrant populations worldwide are having an impact and a sway in terms of how the election outcomes are coming, how different primaries and most importantly different electioneering mechanisms are revolving around pro-migration or anti-migration. And linked to this is also going to be the character of the future liberal order. Now, how do we come about to this? That as a result of the mass migration which has happened in Europe, it is believed that European Union is most likely to have a reverse trend in more nationalist governments. So out of the 22 governments which are likely to go into election, it is believed that maybe 50% of them would favor much more nationalist, what would you say, nominees. So this means that starting from January 13th, which is just passed, Taiwan elections, then we have Indonesia in February 14, Russia in March 17, India in April, South Africa is to be convened soon, then we have UK in May, European Union in June, United States in November 5th. So if you can see, there seems to be a progression in terms of how the electioneering process is going to go. What's also interesting is that who are the players? Now, looking at Taiwan, we understand that there are three political parties. Now, these three political parties, starting from the Democratic People's Party, which is going to be polling to be the largest party without an absolute majority in 2024. So another trend which is also visible, which is just starting from Taiwan, is that those parties which came into power earlier on majority votes no longer are in a position in a domestic arena where they are going to continue to retain their majority. So they are being contested by other political parties which have got either ultra-nationalist perspective or political parties which have got extreme liberal order as their understandings, the ones who are focusing on climate change, the ones who are focusing on health rights, the ones which are focusing on industrial rights and occupation for the young. In the case of Taiwan, it's not just about how the domestic politics is. It's also going to be in terms of whether this is going to become a contestation point between China and United States. Here, the pro-Chinese political party seems to be maintaining the order at the moment. Nonetheless, what's interesting is that none of these three political parties which are visible in the case of Taiwan, that means the Kuomintang Party, the People's Party, and the Democratic People's Party, none of them has been able to come up with a definitive democratic reform which was visible or which could deliver for them. So this is the first thing which we have looked at. And what are the issues? First issue is, of course, China, related to foreign policy. Second issue is cost of living. And third issue is whether or not there is a substantive economic policy which can help these countries to come out of the economic quagmire which they're looking at. So this means that key factors remain linked to foreign policy, plus their linkages to domestic policy. Please, can you move forward? Then we have Indonesia. In Indonesia, we have the Defense Minister, Prabowo Subianto's governor of Central Java province, and also the former governor of Jakarta. Here, also we see the same trend, which is pretty much emerging from Taiwan, but when it goes to Indonesia, it seems the same. Here also the bigger question is about youth unemployment. Second question is the coalition politics, but the coalition politics is not because they want one party or the other party to win, but essentially it is the nature of the young voters. The young voters want to define a new government in the manner in which it redefines their global identity as well as their domestic identity, both in terms of the job market and both in terms of their foreign policy aspirations. Interestingly, the next country is, of course, Russia. Here, it is no secret that one of the biggest factors is going to be whether Putin will manage to retain his authority. He is going to manage to retain his majority. He has had some constitutional reform in Russia, and that has allowed him to have the third term as the Russian president as well. Here, of course, the contesting point is, again, the cost of living, linkage to global economic affairs, and third, but most importantly, the war in Ukraine. Whether the war will come to Russia, at this moment, it is under attack and under siege in different ways. There's the non-state actor pushback in Moscow as well as a result of the war in Ukraine. But interestingly, we also see a revitalization of the defense industrial complex. So this means that it is not so simple. It also means that it's not just about Moscow. It means it's all about Central Asia. It means it is all about the regional politics. And interestingly, the issue is whether or not the government is in a position to deliver a new economic order. So what we can see is that as we move forward in terms of country to country, the trends seem to emerge and re-emerge. That is, what is the future of the global economic order? Who's going to lead it? Number two, whether or not the conflict zones will have an impact on that. And number three, whether or not this is going to play out. Then comes, of course, the country which affects us the most, that is India. And we can understand that one of the key factors which is visible in India and is also becoming visible in other electioneering countries, is that it is moving away from a party focus to an individual focus. So people are more concerned about the charisma, the context of the individual focus in political opinion rather than the actual mandate of the political party. What is happening in the case of India is quite unique. We all know a lot about Hindutva, but what we don't know and what we haven't focused much more is that there is a structural review in India. And the structural review in India is happening as a result of the legislative review which is underway in India. And what is that legislative review? They are disempowering anybody who is not Hindu legally to a state of statelessness. That has happened as a result of the Citizen Amendment Act, that has happened as a result of the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act of 2019, and also for the Assam politics. So what we are looking at is that the National Register for Citizens has put three conditions if you are an Indian and a non-Hindu. What are the three conditions? You must have land documentation 12 years prior to 1947. If you do not have land documentation prior to 1947, then you must have proof of residence in India for 12 years living in any state of India. And if you don't have that also, then you must have something else, and that is what they are expecting, that they're saying that you must have 12 years of education in India. And if you don't have that, you don't have land rights, you don't have documentation, and you have no housing rights, then they will be putting them into detention centers. So the biggest question for us as security analysts and as people who are looking at the electioneering trends is that what is going to be the direct impact on the future of politics in India, future of the Indian state, and most importantly, what is the actual impact of this legislative order, which is under review with Modi. According to various experts who look at elections in India, they believe that it is India trying to create a process where they want to create a permanent majority as the low-caste Hindus to become a permanent majority in all India's electoral processes. And as a result of that, this means that families which are not homogeneous, families which will not have the same religion, whether they're Muslims, Christians, or Sikhs, will be facing an uncertain future in terms of their basic right to identity. This means that it will also affect all relations with the bordering countries, that means Pakistan, Bangladesh, and also reverse migration patterns. So this means that you will be having families which would have their children and their women and their elderly put into detention centers, and others actually working in different government sector. So here, of course, there are the bigger question marks. What are the bigger question marks for the Modi's government? Three. One, economy. Has he actually managed to deliver the Make in India project? He has signed 5 major projects with the United States, which is known as the Defense Trade and Technology Initiative, the DTTI. As a result of that, there is JVs between United States and India, which allows for India to flourish under the Make in India concept and get access to global economy. Second is its international standing, how many international organizations it will be joining, and what will be the structure of these international organizations post effect of India's acceptance in it. And third is, of course, if you can please move forward, is of course the trend of regional elections. Will there be 2 Indias we will be looking in the future? A central India, which is linked to international prestige, and a regional India, which will be focused on regional elections. And in these regional elections, whether we would be looking at other political parties, which will try to push back, and if they do try to push back, what is their collective strength? It is believed that at this moment, neither Congress, neither its coalition partners are in any decisive position to actually overrun the charismatic effect of what they believe of the Modi's government, and Modi in particular. So for the first time, BJP itself is also having an existential crisis where BJP has become synonymous to Modi. So this means a focus away from party politics and going to individual leadership. Now, the same comes for South Africa. So South Africa, the African National Congress is facing the same situation. Here also, the bigger factors are energy security, economy, and public service delivery. And the question mark is the same. The question is how much of that global economic connections and coalitions are delivering for the local populations. Please move forward. Then we have UK. We all know about the Conservative candidate as well as Rishi Sunak, who seems to be in order at this moment. But what we are also looking at is that there is a fierce connection in terms of the Labour fighting back. But none of the Labour candidates at this moment are in a position to actually come up with a definitive vote, which is going to make them a leading majority party. What we are looking at is also that the south of England is much more nationalist, and there are ultra-nationalist candidates which are winning there, whereas the centre is again talking about other elements. So here we are looking at the fringe parties, the Sunak's 5 targets which are linked to economy, integration, and independent identity, and global review is not delivering. So this means that you're dealing, on one hand, a failing conservative policy, and on the other hand, you're dealing with a Labour policy which has not come up with a substantive economic orientation pushback program. So what we're looking is that this is a trend, although it starts from different, and the world seems to be in turmoil when it comes to the European Union. We are looking at, again, the same issues, except that it is domestic policy, institutional questions, and future of Europe itself. That is, whether it is going to be a Europe which is going to become a leader of the global economic order, global human rights order, or for that matter, the liberal order as we understand it, or is it going to be a more securitized Europe, which is going to be based on closed borders, difficult immigration policies, if not a constant war with Ukraine that basically means redefining a new Cold War in Europe. So this is the trend which we're looking at in European Parliament. Please move forward. And what's interesting is that in the European Parliament, the ultra-nationalist parties seem to be on the winning edge, and then come some of the more progressive parties which are focused on issues of green peace and also on climate change. Last but not least, we have in the Western Hemisphere, United States of America. It is for the first time in the United States of America, we are looking at a bipartisan disconnect. Now, what is the bipartisan disconnect? Usually it was always simple. There would be one pro-establishment party, and there would be a party which is supported by the Ministry of Defense, and so on and so forth. It is for the first time that we are looking that both of the president-elects, or for that matter, both of the nominees for the presidential race, are being legally contested in the American legal system. There are different cases on both of them. On Joe Biden on rigging, on Trump for having an anti-nationalist approach and a pro-Russian stance. So for the first time, both are facing this. Second, there is also a bigger question whether or not actually the Biden administration would manage to win the second term. One, partly because of Biden's own health. Secondly, because of Kamala Harris. And third is the linking question with regards to whether or not that Trump has actually snowballed and taken over everything from the Conservative Party as a party and has replaced it with the Trump phenomena. Now, what is the Trump phenomena? The Trump phenomena is, of course, ultranationalism, it's anti-immigration, and at the same time, anti-war. So this means that all those wars which the United States of America has been perpetuating for the last 10 to 15 years are also being sorely questioned by the voting population. So for the first time, it's a reverse policy trend which we have looked at. Bangladesh, I'm not going to speak much more on it, except for the fact that the party has remained intact, but the people seem to be disoriented in terms of what their expectations are from the current ruling party. So most of the people, the opposition abstained, So it shows that the participation itself of the people has not been visible. And then please move forward. I think the last country, ma'am, and then I'll just conclude. Please move forward. We already talked about the presentation will be available, so you can look into details in terms of which political party is going to emerge and what are the state assembly structures in India, and a little bit more focus on that. And of course, then we have Pakistan. Last but not least, this is also going to be a very interesting year because none of the political parties as such will be in a position to have decisive victory in terms of having a majority vote. Whether in terms of legislative hurdles, whether in terms of political hurdles, or whether in terms of actual ability for the people to come forward and cast their votes. However, it will be pretty much clear on 8th of February where it's going to stand. I'm just going to put 3 trends forward and then conclude, and then hopefully have much more interactive session and perhaps talk a bit more about how these global election processes are going to affect global economy as well as global manifestation in international relations. 3 major things are the outcomes of these global elections. 1, the world as we understand and democracy as what is understood stands extremely challenged, both in terms of process, both in terms of nominations, and both in terms of outcomes. Second are the expectations which the people are having from their democratic elite. They need governance to be resolved, so there is major focus in terms of domestic policy issues. People want better job employment, people want better economics, and people also want less wars. Third is, of course, that there is no longer a country which can adequately state that it is 100% homogeneous in terms of its approach or in terms of its electioneering, candidacies, what you call electorate. You have immigrants, you have immigration issues, and most importantly, you have issues of integration. And last but not least, it is directly linked to the fact that the global political order is shaped by the absence of a unified understanding of the global economic order. Since there is no unified global economic order and the world seems to be in transition, we are actually heading in a leaderless, headless year of transition, where personality politics as well as candidacy politics will affect the nature and thrust of future of international relations. We hope for the best, but let me say this with a word of caution. Being an expert in negative security, this is a year of brilliance for negative security and a year of turmoil for all of those who believe in the liberal order. Because everything what we stand for today stands challenged as the world goes into elections. Hopefully the next generation, which is under 40s, is going to decide the future of the next order for the next decade. Nonetheless, this transition is neither going to be smooth, neither going to be seamless, and will be fraught with multiple conflict zones as they will emerge in different parts of the world. We hope and pray that this transition is not going to lead to more conflicts, but the trends indicate that as candidacies get overshadowed by individual personalities, these are going to be some of the pushes and pushbacks in global elections, which is going to affect global international relations. So with these few words, I thank you all for your patience.
Well, the world as we know it and democracy as we understand it is challenged, and the world is in turmoil. And Dr. Maria Sultan has very effectively described the domestic conditions and issues of many of these countries and linked them to the trajectory which we may see or not see in the future, and its influence on the international community. I'm sure there will be many questions. Thank you very much, Maria. That was excellent. And now it is my very great pleasure to introduce Ambassador Mustafa Kamal Kazi, one of Pakistan's most distinguished ambassadors. He was Pakistan's acting foreign secretary, and he held many assignments in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as also including additional foreign secretary. He was ambassador to Russia, the Netherlands, Indonesia, and Iraq. He was our permanent representative to the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons and was elected twice as vice chairman of the OPCW states parties and the OPCW executive board. He was also alternate member of UNESCO executive board in Paris. In his younger days, he served in Tokyo, Paris, Addis Ababa, and Stockholm. After retirement, he has not lost his passion either for diplomacy or for the study of international affairs, and he is associated with think tanks both in Pakistan and abroad. He is on the advisory board of the Center for Strategic Studies, Sindh Karachi, established by the Special Plans Division, Joint Staff Headquarters, Rawalpindi. He interacts with many global think tanks in various parts of the world, in Morocco, in Turkey, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, in Tehran, in Prague, in Germany, in Prague and Leipzig in Germany, and also in the Euro-Asia Economic Cooperation Forum in Xi'an, China. The floor is yours.
Ambassador Dr. Masuma, thank you very much for your kind words and generous introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I was in hospital after surgery of my broken wrist when I got a call from Dr. Masuma Hassan asking me to speak on this topic. I explained my position, but she insisted. One person I couldn't say no is her. So here I am with a sling on my shoulders after 10 days after her call. Dr. Maria Sultan is an outstanding academic and defense and security expert. She has comprehensively covered the subject, leaving not much for me. But I will try to briefly deal with few aspects. Well, as you heard, this year over 60 countries, home to more than half of the world's population, are due to hold national elections. More voters than ever before in the history will go to polls. The result will be consequential for years to come. The polls will test even the most robust democracies. Polls may, in some cases, strengthen the hands of leaders with authoritarian leanings. These elections for leaders and national legislatures will have huge implications for human rights, economies, international relations, and prospects for peace in a volatile world. From a distance, they appear to be a stirring spectacle of self-government, but at a closer range, the picture gets cloudier. Even in countries regarded historically as bright beacons of democracy, credibility of election results have come under challenge. Last presidential elections in USA are an example. Besides, the staggering cost of election campaigns has brought about manifold increase in the role of rich interest groups, not only in determining the outcome of electoral processes, but also decision-making of the leadership so elected. Campaign cost of last US presidential election was around $6 billion. And on accompanying congressional elections, another $15 billion. In total, the November 2020 elections in USA costed a huge sum of US dollars 21 billion. The November 24 elections are expected to be bitterly fought and will cost substantially more. Funding from Wall Street, special interest groups, powerful pro-Israel Jewish lobbies, and military-industrial complex will be of decisive importance. It was craving for Jewish funding for November 2024 elections that both President Biden and the Congress deplorably remained indifferent to full-scale Israeli genocide in Gaza and occupied West Bank. By rejecting Washington's much trumpeted two-state solution and still receiving political support, weapons, and funding, Netanyahu demonstrated who rules Washington on the issue. Rich interest groups' role over electoral processes is becoming widespread. According to Delhi-based Center for Media Studies, last elections costed about US dollars 6.5 billion, roughly $8 per voter, where 60% of the population lives on $3 a day. So even a chaiwala who are transformed into a leader does not come cheap. In some countries, the balloting will be neither free nor fair. For many weary electorates, curbs on opposition candidates and the potential for manipulation and disinformation have made the fate of democracy an issue. According to many analysts, nationalism and parochial politics will drive the outcomes of elections in many countries, including the United States. Voters in many countries will be voting against immigration. A growing breed of populist leaders will try to be busy building a culture of us versus them. The growing use of deepfakes on the social media will threaten elections globally. Elections are no guarantee for democracy, but it is also true that democracy does not exist without elections. A political system should be marked not only for free and fair elections, but also by the rule of law, separation of powers, and the protection of basic rights. With these general remarks, I now dwell on elections in few countries, and then go on to global challenges and scenarios. In South Asia, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, whom The Economist magazine described as South Asia's Iron Lady, has won the fourth term, as you heard from Dr. Maria. She is world's longest serving female leader. Where's the credit to you, both of you? Huh?
You mentioned that.
Her re-election was no surprise, as the opposition parties were boycotted, had boycotted the elections that were preceded by violence. The turnout was record low. Stifling of dissent risks triggering more turmoil in Bangladesh. China, India, and Russia were quick to congratulate her. America and EU, describing elections as not free and fair, called for investigation into the irregularities. But they won't alienate the country because of China factor. Bangladesh's flawed democracy has transitioned into a de facto one-party state. but that is better than a military takeover. The current situation can change in future as constitution remains intact. Economic progress again under Hasina Sheikh's rule helped expand our political space, but that may be coming to stall. Bangladesh now seems to be heading towards economic crisis mode, reversing years of gains. Indian elections are scheduled in April-May. No big surprise there. Narendra Modi is sure to prevail. But the big question is whether his extremist religious agenda and the economic development can be compatible for long. In the past 10 years, many of Mr. Modi's economic accomplishments have existed along with this extremist religious agenda. The BJP's parliamentary strength and Modi's popularity have made it possible to push through difficult reforms. The government's unity and clout have given investors confidence that a policy is stable, even though civil liberties have been eroded. Yet, if Modi in his third term were to lurch further towards Hindutva and autocratic rule, the economic calculus can change. We already heard from Dr. Maria. Besides, the North-South divide with Hindutva having little appeal in the southern India, which is doing well and better economically, can be a constraining factor and create also divisions within India. And again, the question of immigration from north to south, that will also create its own dynamics. Also, if the decision-making becomes more authoritarian and erratic as Prime Minister Modi grows old and even isolated, the institutions become weak, the firms will grow cautious, deploying huge sums of capital. However, we in Pakistan should not expect any change for better from Modi government, nor our government, which will assume office after February elections, should be over-enthusiastic and go overboard. Matters between India and Pakistan have become too complicated after change of status of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Dr. Maria dwelt with Indonesia. I think this question may come on Indonesia, and I'd like to deal with it, but not to repeat what is happening there in the election context. Finally, the rematch between President Biden and his predecessor Donald Trump will be most thrilling event of the election calendar. A potential Trump victory in November would be the greatest upset of the year with far-reaching implications. Under Trump, Europe fears weakening or paralysis of NATO, which could be as bad as USA leaving it. Loss of support for Ukraine, greater US antagonism towards China, US pulling back from fight against climate change, possible infighting in America and its consequences. For Arab Islamic countries, no holds barred support for Israel. Perhaps a Trump win won't be just a 4-year phenomenon. It would be a sign that America has changed structurally. Some argue that even if Trump didn't win, strong support for him will show that America had already changed. Beyond elections 2024 or their outcomes, the quest for a new global order also continues. Whether US-led West likes it or not, the world is moving towards a new reality. With lasting shifts in global economy and technology, a transformed geopolitical landscape is emerging, hopefully based on balance of power and check and balance system to the exclusion of none. Expanded BRICS and SEO are a key factor in this regard. Washington's policy of forever wars sanctions weaponization of the dollar and economic interaction targeting countries of global south in Asia and Africa or rest of the world has created a fearful apprehensions. Therefore, for the rest of the world, sunset of US-led unipolar order, given its hegemonic and exploitative nature, is a cherished goal. For global south, rising China and assertive are a positive development. It will give them diplomatic and strategic space in the emerging multipolar global configuration. However, due to resistance on the part of the West in accepting the new global realities, we are witnessing full-scale polarized geopolitics. Great power competition, risky military confrontations, fights over resources, and a real danger of escalation into nuclear war. The tragic proxy war in Ukraine, prospect of conflict with China over Taiwan, and NATO imprint in Asia, as well as implicit support for Greater Israel Project through genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians will lead to dangerous consequences. Such an approach collides with complex new challenges, such as climate change, pandemics, financial turmoil, global supply chain issues, and nuclear proliferation. To address these issues, we need a global concord. America must look back to its Cuban Missile Crisis, when the USA and the USSR realized the limitations of direct armed conflicts between them. The prospect of mutually assured destruction still rages. At that time, the world was lucky to have John Kennedy, a brilliant president of USA, who overruled his hawkish advisors. Policymakers in the West need to do some introspection of their actions and decisions since 1992 to examine the extent to which they have proved to be counterproductive even for them. Narratives based on good and evil, demonization of systems and leaderships, and rival powers are shallow and simplistic and will cut no ice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kazi, and I'm so very grateful to you that in spite of your injury, you agreed to come and speak here today. If you hadn't come, we would have been denied the excellence of your talk. And yes, it is a world in turmoil in which the old order is under challenge, and many of us would be very happy to see it go. Looking towards a multipolar system which will be more just and equitable, especially for the countries of the global south. You also referred to, and it really charmed me, America's ever war. And the fear is that if Donald Trump comes into power, he will scrap so many agreements and alliances that we will have to find a new way to carry on. I would now like to open this session to questions and answers. And please raise your hand. Aga Masood sir.
Dr. Maria, you had very brilliantly exposed the elections in India, and you have spoken very little about Pakistan. Actually, we are very much interested about the situation in Pakistan because India, we know that after the destruction of the Babri Mosque and the construction of the Mandir, Ram Mandir, actually he has used the religious card, and he has been using since his ascent to power in 1941. So I would like to ask you, and also to Ambassador Kazi, the situation in Pakistan and the relation of India and Pakistan, during the elections. So do you think that there will be a very fair election in Pakistan and we will have a very strong government which can really deal with India and the rest of the world?
It's a very tough question. I will dare to be honest, considering the fact that I'm sitting on an academic forum. First and foremostly, this is not just about Pakistan. I'm going to say something extremely controversial, and my academic friends will hopefully brace me with it. I think this is the end of democracy as we see it globally and what we have understood as democracy. And that's the first and foremost assertion as you look at global electioneering trends. Second is this, that unfortunately in the South, but it is also visible in the North, that the Western concept of democracy, which is based on the electoral process itself, is questioned. Because people believe that going to the polling stations and casting the electoral vote is actually democracy and empowerment. It's not. Because people have questions of governance, people have questions of their health, their future, their economic progress, their political stability, and so on and so forth. So this basically means that if we think in Pakistan that election itself is a question of casting the vote, then it will be free and fair and whatever you call it, as much as possible given the circumstances. But if we are really looking at whether or not we will have a decisive victory for one party, I'm afraid that's not going to happen. In Pakistan's case, it is going to be a coalition government, which is going to most likely come, number one. Secondly, all the political parties, as you see, not only in Pakistan but globally also, they have no tangible pulse on the people. They are not aware of the challenges which a normal person is facing at this moment. Yes, they do talk about issue politics, the issue politics of corruption, the issue politics of doing better and talking about all of these issues. But in reality, they have not managed to translate all these conversations into legislative order. So while we've had, personality-based politics in Pakistan, we have faced different politics in Pakistan, we have not seen a legislative review. So the state structure itself is under great stress. Unless and until we do not legislate properly and we do not have educated representatives in the parliament who are concerned with the problems of the people, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter who comes into power. Sir, most probably we are going to be economically more stable because of the fact that we are, we are one of those blessed countries who are too geo-economic and geopolitically relevant to global security and global economic order. I didn't make a mention of the global economic transitions, but if you just look at the Indian Ocean alone, it is $3 trillion worth of global economic, revenue which flows through every year. And how much of that are we actually taking part of as Karachi? If you look at Goldsmith studies, if you look at Brunswick studies, you look at multiple studies, it shows that Pakistan should be part of the next 10-11. We are not. Why? Because we have a land focus. Because we have an event focus. So for us, democracy is 8th of February. It's not. Because once people have come to the parliament, they are supposed to deliver for the people. They haven't delivered. Now, in contrary to this, what we are going to have is perhaps a real challenge to the Western-led democratic understanding of global politics. It will be replaced with the Chinese, maybe, model where people are having deliverance on governance, maybe not the best of idea of as we understand democracy, but it's delivering for the people. Is it? Is it not? But in terms of what we understand is progress in terms of economic security, in terms of health, in terms of social security, they're having it. So there is this big transition which is underway. So even in the case of Pakistan, it's going to happen. In terms of our economic understanding, yes, we were earlier the US security partners. till 9/11, and after that we have not been part of the US security order. We were never part of the economic order. Henceforth, we fought a war against terror for 20 years. We have been involved in global security confrontations, and we were not part of the global economic progress. India was picked up as a strategic economic and political and military partner. Now, will Pakistan replace that? We are trying to replace that with the SCO. We are trying to replace that being part of BRICS. We have opted for that membership. We are trying to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And mercifully, post this endeavor, at least there is a strong thinking that we should try to align away from the security order towards the economic order. Will the government in charge, whichever is going to come, will be in a position to handle it? We need to see this more in the context of the state structure, whether or not it can survive the transition of the global economic and political order, rather than one political party being strong enough. No political party is going to be strong enough to actually manage and navigate the challenges which we face ahead, because it's the whole world which is under transition, and the Western concept of democracy stands deeply questioned. Not just in Pakistan, not just in India, not just, you have Trumps, you have Modis, you have candidacy taken over by individuals, replacing political parties and ideas. And the people are nowhere in this equation. Yes, corruption is a very bad thing, but what about the actual deliverance for the people? What new legislation has been done? Nothing. So I think it's a strong question you've asked, but in all fair assessment, there will be nobody in charge while everybody will be in charge.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maria Sultan and my senior colleague, Ambassador Kazi, for the brilliant presentation. Keeping in mind that brevity is the soul of which, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. But I have a question, and which is regarding, the Supreme Court's decision taking away Balla from the PTI, which has created a lot of political stir in the country and has infuriated the PTI. And we also see a lot of, analytical articles appearing in the newspapers about it. So I would like to request you both, sir, to throw some more light on it, that what is going to be, I mean, of course, the elections we say are already tainted. So what do we expect out of all this? The Honorable Justice retired Mazda is sitting right next to me, and I would have loved to have her opinion as well, probably after the discourse. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I think with all these talk shows, there's not much for us to really talk about about elections in Pakistan. I mean, you have all brilliant commentators, including one sitting here before us. But you see, basically, in Pakistan, we have tried all kinds of, presidential form of government, parliamentary form of government, military government, democratic government. And none have delivered, sorry to say that. And in fact, very grievous mistakes have been made in the process, more particularly when the governments have been headed by military leaders, I will, take you to Indonesia. Now, Indonesia, from 1945 to 98, was ruled by two personalities, both with military background. Well, the first one as also a freedom fighter, Sukarno, and then afterwards Suharto. Corruption, Indonesia, corruption is also deep-rooted, but it has a method. For instance, every ministry has an officer designated to be in charge of extra funds, the jumping the queue kind of issues, or doing a favor to somebody. There are charges, proper charges, fixed price lists, like DC's issued here for vegetables and groceries. So you go there, you pay to this designated man, you jump the queue. Then it is not only the individual who is doing that favor, but entire fund is distributed according to the pay grades of the officer of that whole department, whole entire ministry, all proceeds, It is a very, very structured, known form. Then, of course, the special favors, like somebody has a clove monopoly to export, only one person, that makes it great, you know. Then, of course, they have they have natural resources, they have petroleum producing country and other minerals and all. So those are given out, I mean, as dole. But Suharto, neither Sukarno nor Suharto had Swiss bank accounts or assets abroad, you know. They own the assets inside the country, made out of corrupt money, you may call corrupt money, whatever, but that is, they own the roads, flyovers, blah, 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 and all that, you know. And they're income bearing, big apartment, big hotels, complexes, etc. And, I mean, you know, now they have, after 98, look at their democracy. The army, they were bifunctional. It's democracy as well as military. The military had 30% presence in the parliament, in uniform. You know, there can't be a greater adulterated military system than in Indonesia. But then, just imagine, after 1992, military totally out of the system. You know, here, the first, I mean, Habibi, I don't know if you heard, he was vice president under Suharto. Very intellectual kind of person, and, you know, conversationalist and everyone, not a politician. He was the vice president. So after Suharto resigned, he took over as president. Then afterwards was elected a blind man, leader of Nadatul Vida, something like that. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah. And he, this leader of this party was a blind man, real blind man. He was elected president. This blind man took the country further on to the path of democracy, you know, a mullah type, you know, basically not mullah, but he was alim. Then something happened in between, so he was voted out, no confidence vote in the parliament. And a housewife, Megawati Sukarno Putri took over, who had no experience at all of politics, you know. She was basically a housewife, shunned by the Suharto government, marginalized totally, and no diplomat would beat her, only except one, that was me, because Benazir came in power here. So I requested the understanding of the Indonesian government that, you know, the exchanges between the two families, and, you know. Anyway, so she took over. Then after her came this president, you know, he two terms, he was mayor of Indonesia, very ordinary person, basically. He had 2 terms. Now for the 3rd term, he sort of promoted his son as, in combination with, what is this? He was the former general, is a presidential candidate now, Subianto, yeah? And he took over. I mean, he is the running for president, probably likely to succeed, and the present president's son is his running mate as president, and democracy goes on. I mean, there's nothing. So there has to be a will, there has to be some sincerity, there has to be some cleanness of heart, and, you know, and unfortunately, that lacks here. Now, Indonesia has no history of being a country historically. It was a creation of Dutch colonialism, you know, basically. Well, we have a long history of being a country, you know. I mean, Arabic accounts, they mention the Indus Valley, Al-Hind wal-Sindh, you know. So we have a history. I mean, Sindh was an independent entity, Balochistan also independent in certain ways. KP, if you say, all the conquerors and rulers of Indian states came from that area, you know. So we have a great, experience of sovereignty, you know. But unfortunately, we have not made any progress. I can't really accept the fact that a person, every 3 years, there is a kind of a rising star who comes up, you know. Who knows economics, who knows politics, who knows military, who knows everything. How is it possible? It's not possible, you know. You can't do justice, you know. You have to be fair to yourself. That this world today, I mean, it's too complex and complicated. You need specialized people, you know, for everything. For all ministries, I would say you need specialized, not these journalists, I mean, you know, this administrative and CSPs and all that, you know. It's in Foreign Office, you know. Everywhere you need specialized people. This is what is happening elsewhere in the world. So I think, you know, we have to really look into ourselves, introspection, and everybody at all levels, and see what is fair. But you can't have it, you know, like what has been going on for all these years. Thank you. That was
Maria Sultan, आप कुछ कहेंगी?
I'm just going to make a very small intervention. You asked a very pertinent question, and I will, in the interest of brevity, just say three things. If we understand democracy is of the people, by the people, for the people, then the people should matter and symbols should have no value. Secondly, if law is supposed to be the supreme under which a country is supposed to progress, then we have to move away from elite politics. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, whether you look at it one angle or the other, we are governed by a sense of exceptionalism based on elite democracy. That elite democracy does not resonate with the people's problem. And that is where the state functions. The state doesn't function in a vacuum. The state functions in the space which exists between the elites, the democratic expectations, and the state's ability to maneuver. Third is the expectation which the people of Pakistan have. We are a country which believes in our strategic culture to be with the underdog. We say crime is accepted so long the person who is doing the crime is one of us. It's not. So if we are going to have rule of law and we are going to actually ask for democracy, then we should also have the ability to understand that inter-party elections are equally important. If the autocratic democratic order is to be questioned, then we should also be able to utilize the legislative structures which are available. We have not gone to our regional parliaments. We have not answered our politicians to deliver for the questions which they are supposed to do, because they're supposed to govern us. We have not asked them to be responsible for it. But it's always convenient to spare all of this conversation in a civil-military dynamic, because it makes it symbolically effective to understand the challenges which we face as Pakistanis. But if we really want to be democratic in principle, in orientation, and deliver for the people, then we will need to ask very serious questions in terms of state, in terms of legality, and in terms of our ability to accept legality. We as Pakistanis want exceptionalism when it comes to the legislative order. And that exceptionalism has been the failure of democracy in Pakistan, or its inability to deliver. None of the political parties, with all due respect, have come up with an economic plan. What is the election manifesto? Thank you. So this says it all. So the question is not the perceived sense of injustice. It is the actuality to understand that the state acts, the government feels. You can't expect the state to feel. The law will be the law. If we are not happy with it, we need to change it. And if we want to change it, we need to have the right people there. And we need to ask the right questions. Favors on one side, reality on another. The real order is much different than the perceived understanding of what the democratic order is supposed to deliver for us.
One of my question about the constitutional rights. You know, the people are organized demonstration in support of the Dharna in Islamabad. So now the different the FIR against them. So I ask you, if there's a dying of democracy, what about the constitution? The constitution is also invalid or dying. And second, from Kazi, is Pakistan is a part of the alliance against OC attack or not? OC is attacking the Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea. Yes. Thank you.
Well, Constitution is a living document, if we believe in it. When was the last time we had actually a constitutional conversation? 1973? We want the 1973 Constitution to become a living document for all ages and all times to answer all questions. I'm sorry, it won't happen. It's just a guiding principle, a guiding document. If you want a review, you need to have serious conversations. What is the only conversation we had? We had the conversation on the 18th Amendment. Are we really even ready to reverse that decision? No, because it has empowered different regional empires, and those empires don't want to be changed. So they want that order to continue. They don't want that order to be challenged. So if we want the constitutional rights to be preserved, then we need to have serious debates on constitutional rights, legislative order, and write. Okay, we might not be in the parliament, but we can write. We can change opinion, we can ask the right questions. If you don't write, you don't ask the right questions, then it's a matter of interpretation for those who are in power to do that for you. And once it's done, it's too late.
Yeah, about Houthis, you asked me. I don't think Pakistan is part of that Armenda. I mean, the American-led Armenda. It's not part of that. But we have a tradition of having our own naval, presence in the area, both in the Arabian Sea, around the Arabian Sea, as well as on the Red Sea area, and especially Bab al-Mandeb. For us, it's very important that the passage remains open, because most of our, all our exports, rather majority of our exports, are directed westwards. And if this waterway closes for us, we have a high stake. And I hope Houthis would not target Pakistani ship. Therefore, we are not, concerned in that way. But we do have this tradition of having presence both in the Arabian Sea area and also in the Red Sea area. Thank you.
Zafar Shafiq, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Mario mentioned about BJP facing an existential threat. Should we not expect Amit Shah taking over, followed by Yogi Adityanath? My question is that, with ultra-nationalist parties taking the lead and with the prevailing thought that liberal order can only promote a capitalist economy, will it be the economy or will it be the security in future?
Let me just say it's a brilliant question. To be very honest, it will be a combination of the security and economic order. But in reality, security order will define the economic space. You fight wars because wars is a continuation of politics. They are not because people actually have differences. It is because people have economic interests. And unfortunately, what is happening in India is not just happening in India. It's the state asserting back, and the people who are changing that are the ones who've come to parliament. Earlier, people would have these brilliant conversations, that people would speak and speak and speak, and nothing would converse on ground. With the BJP coming to power, what have they done? They've changed the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act. They have come up with the Citizen Amendment Act. They have come up with Make in India Act. They have come up with joint JV production between the Defense Industrial Complex and in United States with India. I'll just say one thing. It was unthinkable that the democratic institutions, the institutional character of the Indian state will change so much. What has happened as a result of the changes in their laws. So for the first time, the Indian Supreme Court is a mockery, because they have put in evidence on this Babri Masjid, which is like, 1,500 years? Some of them are 3,000 years BC. I don't even know. I'll stand, totally uneducated on the matter, and we've got more educated people in this affairs to comment on it. How do you actually bring in permissible evidence to the court, which is based on 3,000 years BC, as actionable evidence to demolish a building? How do you do that? How do you say that this is effective? And if that is effective, then every building in the world, every heritage in the world will stand demolished, because somebody 3,000 years ago lived over here. So who are we? So that's one. Second is this, that they are changing national legislation where it suits them. And one thing which we don't talk much about India when we talk about the rise of Hindutva is that it is converted into a people's war. So for the first time, the two-nation theory, for the first time, the reassertion of this ultra-nationalist concept is no longer something held by a minority. It has been legalized and brought to the people. So it is the people's war. Now, if it is in the people's mind, how would you reverse that? You can't. You cannot reverse something which comes to the people. Then it becomes their ethos, it becomes their culture. And third aspect linked to that is that let's not forget that every such ultra-nationalist law which has been passed in India, which has taken away identity from non-Hindus, which is put there into a legislative existence question mark, has been done with the silent acceptance of the liberal order. Where were the conservatives? Okay, they were speaking. Where was the Congress? They were voting on all of these issues. When it came to Kashmir dispute, when it came to Citizen Amendment Act, when it came to the farmers' rights, when it came to creating space for that economics. And last but not least, since you've asked this question, if you just look at India, you'll be amazed to know that Modi's partners are also the leaders of the defense industrial complex. They're all members of the BJP who are now doing JV partnership with the American companies. And interestingly, these are the same partners in the same groups which are also head of their media. So actually you have a troika between information, security, and economics. And who is being popularized in that? The underdogs. They're being told that you will actually have a fair chance of economic progress if you become a permanent majority in India's electoral system. So all the Muslims, Sikhs, non-Hindus will become a permanent minority through legislative inaction and economic new order being built on creating all these, Hindus, the low-caste Hindus, to become a permanent majority in the economic order. So yes, economics will spare security and security will create space for economic development. Will India actually manage to do this? They seem to be doing this just on the Israeli model, and they're not just doing it in Kashmir, they're doing it throughout India. Will this actually work? It is yet to be seen whether Gaza is going to be their success story. But for now, as the Muslim world stands in total criminal silence, as the millions are being killed in Gaza, the story is yes, ma'am, in terms of the fact that the sentiments of the people have been affected, and yes, you're right, thousands are being killed. But the issue is that it's not just a question of today, it's a question in terms of how many years, 75 plus years have gone and people are being killed on daily basis. So it's a constant act of inhumanity, and we are all the silent viewers. With your permission, I would just like to share just a small anecdote. It's about a guy who actually won the Pulitzer Prize. I'm sure you must have seen the guy who was who made a picture of this child starving in Africa and a vulture just standing behind. He killed himself later because he was that silent observer waiting for humanity to come to its end and everything else to take over. We are those people at this moment.
So instead of saving the child, he was busy photographing.
So we are documenting transition, not speaking.
Yusuf Saab? Yusuf Saab?
My question is addressed to the panel. Going forward, once this super year is over and elections are pretty much done, do you see a reformation of the United Nations Security Council, as in more members being added to it?
Well, it's a very, as you know, the reform of the UN Security Council has been a subject on the agenda for the last many decades. And it's a complex subject because there is a tug of war between the West, which is keen to have India and Japan and probably Germany, while Italy They say, well, what about us? We also lost war. Why should we be also not in the permanent, amongst the permanent members? So different processes, and also if South Africa is going to come, then Indonesia, and South Africa is another country in Africa which has a potential to be, be part of the expanded Security Council. So I think this deadlock will continue. They were all going on. The diplomacy. Russia says, oh, we're looking forward to India coming in. We're looking forward to expansion of Security Council. While also United States, the same, if you see these statements that are made by President Trump, even President Biden also similar. There is something, you don't lose anything, but there is a strong stalemate. I don't see any hope of the getting through, because China will veto. This is a very important. If China gives up the veto, then it's different. I don't see China giving up veto, at all. So I don't see any prospect of expanded, reformed Security Council.
I think even if there is a move towards it, and it is a positive move, it's going to take many, many years. It's not something that will happen very soon. It will probably take 20-25 years. जी आप बहुत देर से हाथ उठा रखा है.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम. I am Zahid Hassan, student of Political Science from University of Karachi. My question is for Dr. Maria. Madam, you already talked about populism in the 21st century. So what are the challenges of populism, and what are the opportunities of populism? And if we all are looking forward to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Well, in every structural change, there is always a positivity which is hidden within. The question is this, that unfortunately we are dealing with individual populism. So populist democracy is also focused on individuals more, not just in Pakistan, but we've seen that in the case of United States and so on and so forth. The only opportunity is that they can make decisions and can bring transitions. For example, the question was asked whether wars are a continuation of foreign policy. For the United States, this has been the primary tool of international relations for the last 7 decades or more. It's only when Trump said that he doesn't want a war in Iraq, he doesn't want a war in Afghanistan, he wants a pullback, he could take those popular decisions, irrespective of the fact that he may not be very popular outside of the United States, and we don't understand the domestic realm. But he was able to take very decisive decisions and reverse the entire war establishment, which would have never been possible had it not been a popular leader. So the good thing is that you do have an opportunity for change. So the structural problems which become a necessity for state function can be reversed. He came out from a lot of international trade agreements which were unthinkable in the United States, that it would not be bipartisan accepted, so he managed to do that. In terms of the challenges is what we are looking at as state reversal in India, or what we have looked at as state reversal in Germany. Lots of popular decisions which are being reversed. So it's a bigger question whether we have check and balance. Unfortunately, with the current democratic understanding of the world as we understand, democracy, in my humble opinion, has failed the test of actual reform. It has not reformed enough to deal with the challenges which we face from technology, information, people's expectations, and our life and opportunity to move ahead. There is another concept in international relations known as disaster capitalism. So as a war strategist, this is something which you teach endlessly to your students. And that's where you can build better structures, more sustainable structures, and that can sometimes happen through popular democracy and populism. Whether or not you have people with economic vision and political vision and security vision is another game. That is the dilemma and the Achilles heel, because people who are usually populist don't want to make unpopular decisions. So this is, a check and balance. I would just stop with that because the debate can endlessly go depending upon which side of the argument we want to take.
You see, populism is a new phenomenon, and if you see, it coincides with the expansion of social media. Now, social media has taken over in many countries the mainstream media. And this access to information and access to different narratives about creating hope and creating despair at the same time has been exploited by certain personalities, who feel that, look, as the population feels, not having the right due. At the same time, it has too much of information about what's happening in A country and B country and C country and etc. So it creates a very fertile ground for any politician, we have one here also, to take over like a Pied Piper, the people, and without really having the capacity to deliver. So that is it. And they are very strong in social media.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Irfan Amir and I'm a research assistant at this institute. My question is from both, anyone can answer. Looking at soft power and public diplomacy, what strategies do you think Pakistan might or may adopt post-election to boost our influence and reputation globally?
I don't think soft power is the only thing that matters actually. People don't see one aspect in any country. You are seen as a composite. It's a whole mirror of how you look to outsiders, you see. And if you are broke, if you are having difficult internal situation, your economy is not doing well, it doesn't have prospect for outside investors to come and invest in your country. So, and then also, you have for a few years, 10 years, you have military government, then suddenly there is a civilian government, and that also is something that doesn't have the capacity to deliver. Now look at what happened, to CPEC. Now CPEC was a great project, but those who were at the helm of affairs at that time, they went for, Chinese don't dictate you, that's a culture. They don't dictate any country what you should do or what projects you should take, They leave it to you, your choice, what projects you want to do. Now, they did the projects which had very little capacity to deliver payback, Now, again, these are the people who do a thing like that only who will take loan and not think of paying back. And if you see closely, that is the culture that exists among those decision makers, So, any project you do, you have to consider, are you going to be able to pay back? Now, if you are having imported coal projects, based in Karachi or Hob, or in Punjab, and imported coal, criminal, and it comes too expensive. On the other hand, you have your own coal, you ignore it, You say, okay, we'll have it, but it can be on the side. Similarly, roads. Now, roads in country means when you are focusing on roads, you need fuel for it, you import fuel, you are fuel deficient country, You need to import the vehicles, that also costs foreign exchange. But if you were to go for railway, one single project would transform the whole country and carry the freight at a fraction of the cost that is done by the transportation by road. And all the people, look at the country, the size of the country, so many kilometers, up and down. If we had it, a good, proper railway, and China is the superpower in building railway infrastructure anywhere in the world, including in Europe. And we didn't take that opportunity. That project was way down because of reasons I don't want to talk about. Thank you.
Maybe you'll talk about them some other time.
Just make a small contribution. Is it possible?
I will wrap up after your comment.
I'm just going to wrap it up in maybe less than a minute or so. Your question is very valid. I think Pakistan is one of those unfortunate countries which has got excellent people with a bad time cover. we have been securitized way beyond our expectation. And that basically means that we're dehumanized as well. So when you're talking about soft culture for Pakistan and the soft image for Pakistan, our biggest strength lies in our culture, which is based on diversity, which bases itself on actually absorbing differences of view, if you look at us from historical perspective. You see, at the end of the day, business is done on cost of business and ease of business. The rules are the same everywhere. It is your cultural sensitivity and some other elements which need to be highlighted. So if Pakistan is actually looking for transformation and we're actually looking for soft power to deliver for us, then we have to embrace our culture and embrace the fact that you have much to offer to the world if we are not at war with ourselves. We are at war with ourselves because we demonize everything good about ourselves. There's lots of good things which we have as a country. We have lots of positive things which we can bank on. But most importantly, it's the youth, all of you, which this country has to offer, and a global economic order which will be shaped by people like you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both our speakers for their very excellent presentations. I don't agree that we are at war with ourselves. I beg to disagree, because I have so much interaction with people on the ground. They are innovative, they are inspirational, they are tolerant, although much of the tolerance has been taken away because of various factors. We all know what those factors are. Much of that tolerance has receded. And their work, especially the work of the young people, whether it is in art or culture or writing or painting, I mean, go and look at the streets of Karachi, how they have painted every wall. So I don't think that people who are at war with one another or with each other would be doing that. And I think that this kind of fact that we haven't delivered, no government has delivered, I think you may be right in some respects that governments have not delivered. They have not been able to eradicate poverty. There have been elitist projects which have sidelined people, which have marginalized people. That may be so. But on the other side, there is also a very strong movement of dissent. And we should accept that. I sit here in my office and day in and day out, I see these processions of dissent. In my youth, these processions were not there. I see them every day going towards the press club, and invariably they are led terribly. It is the women who are in the forefront, and the people say women have a terrible time in Pakistan. Yes, of course, we read about the most cruel things that are done to them in the press, but on the other hand, they have also achieved a great deal, and we should accept that. Now, about the 18th Amendment and various other issues which have been raised, I am a historian. So I don't think in terms of years, I think in terms of centuries. And 75 years is not such a long period of time. It is nothing. It's like a grain of salt in terms of historical processes. So I think in these long terms, and I'm sure that after another 75 years, unless something really drastic and terrible happens, Dr. Maria, that there may be something to celebrate. Another thing that occurred to me while I was listening to both the speakers was that what is the use of an election in a country in which a major party doesn't take part? It's a non-starter. I mean, look at Bangladesh. After all the stifling of dissent and the imprisonments and all that was done before the elections took place, the Prime Minister has come to power, but what does it mean? Nobody opposed her. So unless you have a vibrant opposition, coming to power doesn't really mean anything at all. Although we all recognize that Bangladesh has made a lot of economic gains and it's been praised for it no end. So let us think in terms of centuries like a historian. and think in, I hope, you've also expressed the hope for the future. Very often you said you hoped, you hoped, you hoped. And so we all hope, we all know this is a world in turmoil, we know that the old order is breaking down, we know that we are looking for a multipolar order, we know that we want justice for the global south, we all agree on that, and we hope that we will all, especially with the young people in our country, who are, I think, very innovative and very distinctive, that I hope that we will be able to go ahead. And with this, I wrap up this session and invite all of you for a cup of tea.